Hello and welcome back to another update. We go straight to the point as we have significant news and reports to report on. And we start out in the direction of Avdiivka, where there is a significant all-out offensive by the Russians all throughout the front line. And so far, the only advances that have been reported were reported by Deep State Map here in the north. The Russians, according to Deep State Map, have managed to capture the whole area to the northeast of Avdiivka, which I have been predicting many times that with the Russian breakthrough here to the northwest, the Ukrainians would be forced to pull out, and now the Russians have full control of it. This means that the Russians have a complete and direct line to get into the city, and this has been proven with this advancement which has taken place through the Dacha area and into the railways. The Russians now have reached the railways, and this can be seen with this drone footage which shows that the Russians have a clear overview over the area here by the railway bridge. If we zoom in far enough, we can see the railway bridge, and under this bridge a Ukrainian soldier is taking cover from this Russian drone that overlooks the area. There are Russian FPV drones and there are Russian drones overlooking the area as the Russians storm through the city. The Russians have clear aerial reconnaissance over the whole northern parts, and with this the Russians are just storming through and are now only 800 meters from the supply line. We can see that right here, 800 meters from the main supply road in and out of Avdiivka. And if they reach that, the Ukrainians would have no supplies throughout this whole area of Avdiivka itself. So the whole area, whole defense of Avdiivka is completely crumbling as I make this report. If the Russians are allowed to continue in this direction, then the Ukrainians' defense in Avdiivka will completely collapse. What we are seeing in these advancements is, first off, starting out in the center, the Russians with full control over these fields is now allowed to send additional reinforcements and troops into the city. They can also send armored vehicles into the northern outskirts of the city and reach into the residential areas. With this, the Russians can now support their infantry assaults with armored vehicles. At the same time, they can bring the artillery much closer, which will allow them to heavily bombard the coke plant if they want to start storming that as well. At the same time, it also means that they can send additional infantry to the front line and start storming the center of the city. And with all of these developments, they are likely gunning straight for the main supply line to just completely cut off any supplies in and out of the city and completely cut off the Ukrainian forces from that supply. We see that with the fighting that has gone around the Dacha area and simply bypassed all of the Ukrainian defenders to go straight to the railways, and they're now only the 800 meters from the supply line. As for the eastern parts, we see here that they finished taking control over the Dacha area here to the east of the lake, and they're now closer to cutting off this road as well, this fortification area. This has been left in the gray zone according to Deep State Map. At the same time, we have the advancement which I reported on yesterday here to the northeastern parts of the forest patch to the southeast of Avdiivka has been confirmed by Syriac maps, and with that the Russians also have a foothold in the northern parts of the forest patch similar to the southern parts, and they are likely going to gain control of this forest patch as the Ukrainians will be forced to withdraw from it due to a lack of supply line if the Russians continue and manage to cut off the main supply line. The same here in the south, we see the Russians have started a general offensive in the direction of all the Ukrainian defensive positions, both here to the southwest of the residential area, as well as within the military base, and here to the northwest of the military base, as they're looking to go around and flank these Ukrainian positions. So the Russians are just going on and doing a general offensive in all directions of Avdiivka. They are completely forgetting both of the flanks and just gunning straight for the city, the citadel area, the fortifications, the residential area, the forest patches, the Dacha areas to the east of the city, the supply line to the west of the city, and into the center of the city itself, completely bypassing all of the ideas and predictions I made in the south to just go and gun straight for the north. The whole thing in the south was just a massive diversion from the massive operation that is now taking place in the north. As for other areas, we have additional reports. First off, in the direction of Avdiivka, the Russians also managed to regain their positions here after the Ukrainians made a sudden attack and managed to capture the fortifications and trenches here by the line of contact. The Russians managed to recapture it after a few days. Further north in the direction of the Terny and Avdiivka area, the Russians have also managed to capture the fortification of the Ukrainians here, gained a foothold in the forest patch, and as such their offensive is developing here as well. As I mentioned in a previous update, the general advances by the Russians are all pointing towards a build-up to a bigger development, and that development is being teased by the Russian Telegram right now. They are mentioning that something big is coming and they expect a lot of casualties. That is likely because the Russian offensive in reality has not really started yet. All they're doing right now is positional fighting. If the Russians manage to capture the Serebets River line and Avdiivka, we are likely going to see larger operations or new operations against bigger cities within the Donetsk region. Something like in the direction of Uledar, strengthening the offensive there. In the direction of Konstantinivka, from the Bakhmut direction towards Konstantinivka, and from the Avdiivka direction towards Konstantinivka, flanking it from two sides. There's multiple possibilities for what the Russians will do. They're in the direction of Siversk, flanking it from the direction of Bakhmut, in the direction of Liman, going for the city, in the direction of Kupiansk, storming the city. There are so many possibilities, and the Russians have simply built up their forces in every single one of these directions with hundreds of tanks and tens of thousands of soldiers. They have the manpower, they have the equipment, they have everything ready for such offensive operations. Not a major one going for major cities like Kharkiv and Zaporizhia, but minor offensive operations going for these smaller cities like Konstantinivka, Liman, Vuldar. We also have additional information such as this geolocation to the north of Vesele, where we see Russian soldiers advancing and manage to capture these positions. This is not new information, not new geolocation. It is just confirmation from old reports. We also have this in the direction of Marinka to the northwest of the city, again showing older advancements by the Russians that have now been confirmed with geolocated footage. In the direction of Klishchivka, we also have this here to the north of the village, again geolocated footage showing old advancements. All of this confirmed that the reports I've reported on does not come out of thin air. It is something that is confidential until it is released, and therefore I released the information about the territorial changes before the actual footage arrives to be geolocated. So pretty much what we are seeing in addition to all of these developments is simply that the Russians have been doing this build-up for a long time, and to come with some numbers to make it pretty simple, we have this information based on open sources. We have this Forbes article from quite a while ago that says that the Western forces expected the Russians to only be able to produce about 20,000 artillery shells a month. Then we have this article here, where according to Skibitsky, Russia in 2023 produced roughly 2 million 152mm and 122mm artillery shells. So the Western estimate was 20,000 a month. Instead, Russia produces 5,000 a day, or 150,000 a month. That is 7.5 times more than what they were expecting. At the same time, we see that what was promised to Ukraine by the EU was 1.1 million shells by the end of the year. Instead, they only shipped 524,000, running short of their promise. The United States now produces 30,000 shells a month, and it's on the course to make 80,000 at the end of 2024, which is still half of what Russia produces by itself. And that is besides the fact that Russia also bought millions of shells from North Korea, which had millions of shells in reserve in the storage. So we have these massive developments. We have an all-out attack on Avdiivka. We have a significant shell advantage and production advantage for the Russians. We have a massive Russian buildup throughout the front line. We have a lot of positional fighting. So in the end, what we are seeing is that we are at the prelude to a massive Russian operation that is going to be significantly bigger than what we're seeing right now. What they are calling this operation right now is the cold season, and we're going into the hot season very soon, according to these rumors. So what we're going to see, is it going to significantly develop the situation? Are we going to continue a stalemate? We don't know. all we can say is based on the fact that the Russians are making a significant buildup. Like this Forbes article saying Russia has massed 500 tanks for an attack on Kupiansk. Thousands of Ukrainian drones await them. So there is this going to be this massive show-off between the Russians and the Ukrainians. Who knows how it ends, but it is definitely going to begin, and it's going to begin soon. And that's going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.